My time there was collection building and diversifying the collection.
It started with 53 trees. How many was there by the time you left?
Tried to grow them on a third-story apartment windowsill over a radiator. That didn't work.
While you were the curator at the Bonsai Museum, you did your study abroad in Japan.
You can't experience bonsai in the same way here that you can when you are, say, in Japan or China and Korea, where it is part of the history, part of the culture.
Being the expert that you are, we often get asked, like, Penjing, bonsai, what's the difference?
Maintaining a tree and watching it develop over time is one way of being rewarded in terms of how a child goes.
Do we have time to take a look at a couple of your trees?
Hey everybody, this is Robert from Asia Pacific Gardening.
And this is Nolan from Asia Pacific Gardening.
We will get to the video in just a minute. Thank you all for watching our YouTube channel. This is our 100th video.
And that's a big deal. When I first started this channel, I know I wanted to make 100 videos, and each video just needed to be better than the one before. So this is our 100th video, but we're not going to stop here. And for our 100th video, we wanted to do something special. We were able to interview a bonsai legend here in the Pacific Northwest by the name of David the Groot. He wrote this book here, and we'll talk more about this book in the video. This is going to be a long one. It's an interview format. So sit back, grab coffee, grab some snacks, and enjoy the video. And speaking of snacks, we have a great snack option here from our friend Galactic Druid Treats. If you visit galacticdruidtreats.com and use promo code BONSAI20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off delicious freeze-dried candies. Galactic Druid Treats takes some of your favorite candy, put them in a freeze dryer, and it comes out airy, crispy, full of flavor. And if you're like me, you like caramel stuff, they often stick to your teeth, not when they're freeze dried. So you can enjoy sweet, caramel, delicious goodness without having to worry about sticking to your teeth. So again, visit galacticdruidtreats.com, use promo code BONSAI20 at checkout to get 20% off, and they'll ship the candy straight to your door. So, let's get the video started. Hey everybody, this is Nolan from Asia Pacific Gardening, and I have Mr. David the Groot here. He is the former curator of the Pacific Bonsai Museum here in the Federal Way area. He's a published author. He's won medals in exhibitions. He has an impressive bonsai collection. Musician. Anything else I'm missing?
Nothing at all. That's fine.
Okay. Can you tell our YouTube fans who you are and what is your role in the bonsai community?
Okay, who I am? Well, you introduced me.
Yeah.
So, my role in the bonsai community now is that I am a board member of the Puget Bonsai Association.
Okay.
And I am still active in teaching, doing some traveling, workshops, and so on and so forth. And just enjoying my own collection, which is basically a hobby collection. In other words, I have no commercial interests of any kind.
Yeah. You create bonsai for your own pleasure, not to sell.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Have you put a limit on how many bonsais you have? Do you have room for more?
I don't really have. There are two limits, actually, aren't there? There's a space limit and there's a time limit. And the time limit is more critical because time limits affect the health of the trees. So, in other words, if you have too many to care for them properly, do the proper maintenance and so forth, then the trees will decline. So then that's not a good idea. So in other words, I have actually too many now. Luckily, I have some friends who come around and give me some help with them. So I'm able to maintain what I have right now.
Have you always been interested in the art of bonsai?
Well, let's say for a long time. The first time I encountered bonsai was when I was a college student in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in Milwaukee, there's a place on the south side called Mitchell Park. And in there is a conservatory that consists of three huge glass domes with different environments. There's a tropical environment, a desert environment, and a temperate environment. And my wife and I visited the conservatory one day, and I saw for the first time what I believe was the first exhibit by the Milwaukee Bonsai Society. I saw an exhibit of bonsai, and I was just blown away by it. And I was intensely interested instantly. And so going back, I went back home to our family cottage near Green Bay and dug up some seedlings and tried to grow them on a third-story apartment windowsill over a radiator. That didn't work. I had no knowledge. I had no knowledge of what to do or how to do it. So my early attempts failed, but my interest continued, and we moved to Boston, and I attended the Boston Flower Show, and big one, and I saw bonsai again, rekindled an interest, and finally, after graduation, we moved to New Orleans, and in our first year there, 1972 Christmas, my wife bought me a bonsai.
Oh.
Okay. And so that became my first actual bonsai.
Do you still have that tree?
Oh, are you kidding? No, of course not.
Okay, so just want to reassure to all the viewers, even the best of the best lose their trees. I've clearly lost my first sugar trees. My dad has lost his first sugar tree.
Yeah, after 53 years, I still, occasionally will lose a tree.
And that happens. Sometimes it's out of our control.
That's right.
So after you moved to New Orleans, after you moved to New Orleans, you got your first tree. Tell me the journey of that tree. What did you learn from that?
Well, I was lucky enough that just a couple weeks later, we saw an ad in the newspaper for a meeting of the Greater New Orleans Bonsai Society. And we attended the first meeting. This is just a couple weeks after I got my first bonsai. And I believe it was actually the second meeting ever of the Greater New Orleans Bonsai Society. But there were some young people there, very enthusiastic. It was being led by a young man named Vaughn Banting and his wife. Vaughn was a professional horticulturist and had been pursuing the art of bonsai since he was a child. And so I immediately fell in with a group of people that had some knowledge, and which was a great help.
Knowing what you know now, with your extensive time spent with bonsai, what would you tell your young David self about bonsai?
Well, I would say that at that time I did as much as I could. In other words, the information available was a mere tiny fraction of the information that's available now. In other words, the internet, social media has brought information to people that was unthinkable back then.
Yeah.
So there were a few books out there. There were some newsletters, and of course the American Bonsai Society had a magazine that came out quarterly, as did Bonsai Clubs International. So we had some articles that we could pursue. In our club, I became a newsletter editor, and I had a young woman in the consular office in New Orleans translate some articles from Japanese magazines for us to kind of incorporate into our newsletter.
And back then, there weren't a lot of English literature in the art of bonsai, right?
No, there was not much. There was, of course, the most famous person I should say the most famous person in the country at that time was probably John Maka. On the East Coast, it was Yuji Ushinura. And those two people really were the mainstays. There was also a Chase Rosade, who had studied in Japan, and he was in Pennsylvania. And a young man named William Valvanus, or Bill Valvanus, who in New York, who was an up-and-coming uh, star, I guess you could say, in the world of bonsai. And so there were some options.
Okay.
We in the club had visiting guest artists several times a year, and they would do workshops with us. They would do critiques, demonstrations, and often would visit private homes. We could hire them individually, and they would do critiques of our collections or help us individually. So I think we pursued as much information as we could, given what was available.
Is that what inspired you to write your book, because of the lack of information out there?
Actually, I wrote my first book in 1995, which is after I had come here, and I was serving as curator of the at that time Pacific Rim Bonsai Collection. And I had written numerous articles for the American Bonsai Society's journal. And the president of the society at that time, a man named Jack Weichel, asked me if I would basically take the information that I had generated plus more and do a book. So I did what I call a booklet. It was a little half-page size spiral-bound book called Basic Bonsai Design. And that went through a number of printings. It's sold a lot of copies. Your father sold some.
Yeah, he still has a copy.
Yeah. And so that dates back to 95. So that was 30 years ago.
And then you did a bigger one, the Principles of
Bonsai Design. I did several years later, and I added a considerable amount of material to what had been in the first. It was full size, hardbound book. And then more recently, within the last, I can't remember anymore, maybe 5 years or so, I came out with a new edition, which has some added material to it, and a different design and so forth. And so that is now what's available in paperback.
And people can buy that online, right?
They can buy it online. Stone Lantern is the publisher, and Stone Lantern, you can order from Stone Lantern.
Okay. I'll drop the link in the description, so if you're interested in picking up the book, just click on that. What I appreciate about it, it's a really easy read, easy to understand. It's not overly complex, but you cover some high-level material. And like me reading through that really changed how I looked at bonsai trees as well too. So everybody should get one if you're into bonsai, because you can learn a ton.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm very visually oriented, so I made sure that I had a lot of illustrations in it, because that's basically how I learn, is by reading, but I also learn by seeing.
Me too.
And so yeah, so that's one aspect that I tried to focus on that.
And you drew all those pictures yourself.
Yeah.
Dang. Accomplished artist as well too. So we kind of heard a little bit about your backstory. How did you go from being in New Orleans to becoming the curator of the Pacific Bonsai Museum? And that's a pretty important role.
Yeah, so in New Orleans, I was musician with the New Orleans Symphony, and taught part-time at Royal University there, applied music. So my role in the orchestra, because many of the activities are in the evening, meant that I had a certain amount of daytime free or available to me. So bonsai was my hobby. Music was my profession. But bonsai became a sort of avocation with me because of my enthusiasm. And I studied what I could, as we talked about earlier, studied intently, and became more involved. I eventually started traveling to do lectures myself.
Lectures about bonsai or about
Yes,
music?
about bonsai.
Okay.
And I was, as I mentioned earlier, I was editor of our club newsletter for several years, and it ended up being distributed to several clubs in the U.S. and I think 8 other countries, clubs in 8 other countries. So it had a pretty wide distribution, and I created most of the content for it.
So you were a content creator before social media was a
Yeah, so I had a lot of content, and what happened is in the mid '80s, the New Orleans Symphony began to have financial problems, and I could see that it was going to have a big impact on me, and so uh, I took leave of absence so that I could devote more of my time to bonsai. So I then acquired bonsai clients in the New Orleans area and began to labor for them and so forth, while still on leave from the orchestra. Uh, and then one day I saw a newsletter that came out, a American Bonsai Society newsletter that said there was a new collection, bonsai collection being formed in Washington State, and they were seeking a curator. And they said the notice said that the person had to have been in bonsai for 15 years. At that point, I had been in for 17 years. I had to have examples of published work, of which I had many. The one possible sticking point was that you had to be internationally known. And just by luck, about a month before, I had been one of the headliners at the first ever Venezuelan bonsai convention, National Bonsai Convention.
So that checks the mark.
So I did this as a lark. I had no expectation of getting the job. It was just, I thought there's a lot of competent people out there. I did it as a lark. I checked all the boxes. So I sent in my application and got a phone interview, and thereafter was invited out for an in-person interview here. And then I was just lucky enough to get it. So
Then you just packed up everything and moved.
we did. I was negotiating for the position while we were on vacation in Wisconsin, and so that made the vacation interesting. But I think the interview was in June, and in August of 1989 it came out.
And you brought all your bonsai collection out here too.
Yes, I did. I rented a U-Haul truck, built shelves in it, and hauled my trees out.
Carpenter as well. Look at this guy. So moving your life, uprooting from the south up to here, was the role intimidating for you, being the curator of, I think back then it was called the Weyerhaeuser?
Yeah, Pacific Bonsai Collection, yes. And well, yeah, it was a new experience. It wasn't intimidating in the sense that there were some wonderful people here from the Bonsai Club who had assembled the initial collection and worked with me and supported me and helped me in every possible way, as well as some people at Weyerhaeuser who were equally supportive. And I found that it was a very good place to be.
And what do you do as a curator of a bonsai museum? What's your day-to-day like? And what programs or events that you curate?
Oh, I guess it depends on what kind of curator you are. So I was a managing curator. In other words, I was a manager of the facility as well as the collection. So in other words, The first 5 years that I was there, a lot of my time was devoted to uh, acquiring infrastructure. In other words, when the collection opened, there was only the display area. Um, there wasn't a place to keep tools. There wasn't a place to work on the bonsai outside of the display area and so forth. So working with Weyerhaeuser, um, their CAD team and others, um, managed to get infrastructure that included tool shed, potting shed, garage, and then we finally opened a reserve area for the trees with a couple greenhouses and shade structures and so forth. So that all came bit by bit, working on it as well as working on the trees. And then recognizing that when I got there, we had 53 trees, whereas we had 60 display places.
Oh, there
So
was some empty
we
spots.
needed to build the collection too. So there was a lot going on in those first 5 years.
What do you look for in a piece that checks all the marks for it to be appropriate to be displayed in the museum?
Well, and one of the things you consider is always the environment. So, in other words, when you go into the Pacific Bonsai Museum, you'll see it's a very large environment. The trees are put on tables that are 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep. And there are huge trees, 100-foot trees and more all around. And so one of the things you look for is, will the tree be big enough to have a sense of presence that when you look at it, it won't be lost in its environment. So quality is, of course, that's the very first thing in terms of does it have a design that's memorable, that makes you, like any piece of art, that makes you want to come back and view it again. Has it been well maintained? In other words, especially in the beginning, I did not want to acquire trees that needed additional few years of development. In other words, what we call developmental material. I was not interested in that. I wanted trees that could be put immediately on display. So that meant the technical work on the trees had to have been very good, as well as the design of the trees and so forth. So we looked for high quality material right away. That was one issue. The other issue was that it was called the Pacific Rim Bonsai Collection, in part because of Weyerhaeuser Company's trade relationships in Asia. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure of was that the selection contained trees directly from Japan, not just from the United States that had been brought in years earlier, but directly from Japan, directly from China, directly from Taiwan, directly from Korea. And so that was the kind of the next phase of my time there, was collection building and diversifying the collection to reflect the name Pacific Rim Bonsai.
Like when you first got there, the 53 trees that were there, were they mostly American bonsai?
Mostly American bonsai. There were some that were brought in by by a woman named Sharon Muth, a wonderful woman. She traveled to Taiwan and got some trees from Taiwan. And I think there was one fee from a Korean artist, Mr. Kim Se-won. And then there was one or two trees that had come from Japan maybe many years before, but had been essentially maintained, developed by American artists. So is, for the most part, by and large, it was American trees.
And by the time you left the museum, it started with 53 trees. How many was there by the time you left?
Oh, there were about, I think there were about 120,
Okay.
125. Ideally, what the museum or what you would like to have would be about uh, at least a 2-to-1 ratio, where you have two trees in reserve for every tree that's on display. And that's because you need to um, locate the trees for work. Sometimes trees encounter disease or insect problems that need to be treated off-site. Uh, well, there are many reasons. Doing developmental work that might temporarily require the use of guy wires or special bending techniques or whatever. Many reasons. Um, Given more light or getting them into a shade structure for a while. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why you want to retire a tree from display. Also, sometimes trees, if they're kept in perfect viewing condition, perfectly coiffed, if you will, um, eventually get weak. The trees at some point have to be given a chance to just grow out, grow wild, have a lot of foliage, make a lot of energy, and kind of store up some energy. And then they can be brought back into display condition again. So that's part of what's required is just giving the trees a break, getting them off, just let them grow for a while. So,
That's one of the reasons you rotate your bonsai trees too, so they're not
yeah,
always on full front
not
display.
always on display.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned that there's a 2-to-1 ratio on the amount of space versus trees. Does it is it safe to say that every time you visit the bonsai museum, you can potentially see different trees?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Trees are rotated with some frequency through there, and yeah, so you will definitely see that, and you'll see some old friends. You might see some trees that have been redesigned since the last time you were there, because obviously it's a living art. The trees growing, the trees changing constantly with the seasons, with the years, and so. Um, in some cases, a tree will overgrow its intended design simply by parts of it becoming too thick, perhaps. Sometimes a part of it will die off, but there will be the tree's under constant change. So at some point, you might find that the curator has done some redesign work, or sometimes just aesthetically because the curator would see an opportunity for design improvement in the tree. So there are many reasons why you can come back to the museum and see not only some different trees, but potentially at least see a tree that's had some changes maybe since the last time you were there. The other aspect is that Aaron Packard, who's the current curator, is doing a wonderful job in putting on very interesting special exhibits.
I've
Other
heard of that.
arts, for instance, and an exhibit that's still continuing right now. The idea of just explaining bonsai, how you know, what is the soil issue? What is the water issue? How do you care for it? And so on. And all that is a wonderful kind of walkthrough exhibit that's combined with the trees. So there's a lot of stuff to see. And the more time you spend and kind of really look at the trees, the more a person will get out of it.
And it's free to enter.
It's free. There's a donation that's suggested, and I suggest that people do in fact donate, but it is actually only by donation. Anyone could just go in for free.
That's awesome. So it makes bonsai accessible to everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the description if you folks want to donate to the Pacific Bonsai Museum. Please feel free. It's a great resource to introduce bonsai to the community. With your time at the museum, is there a favorite tree in there?
Oh, I've been asked that a lot, and I have some favorites in the sense that I enjoy looking at them very much and I go back to them. Um, if you said a favorite, singular,
It's hard.
but there's several. There's wonderful Korean yew. That I think is just they're massively redone. Um, there, there is a juniper by Amy Liang or Amy Chang or Mary named Amy Chang from Taiwan. That's a beautiful tree. That was part of the original 53. Um, there's a Korean hornbeam that we call sumo in a way because it's got just this enormous trunk on a not very tall tree and it's very impressive. And the list goes on. There's some trees that have come from bonsai stars, like Ryan Neal, for instance, and there's some beautiful junipers. So anyway, there are too many that are outstanding for me to say I have one favorite.
Do you have a tree under your?
Do I have a tree in there? No,
Not yet.
no. Um, um, my job was to care for the trees that were in there rather than try to get one of mine in. And I still, I don't have one in there yet, and that's not up to me. That's up to the museum. And at this point, I'm still enjoying my trees.
You don't want to donate one yet.
And I am not ready yet. I like my trees, and I like them here.
Gotcha. While you were the curator at the Bonsai Museum, you did your study abroad in Japan. Can you share a little bit more about that experience? And did you get to choose who you studied under?
Yes, I did. Well, I'll say this. I took a trip to Japan for pleasure with two friends of mine from Oregon, and a woman who's been deeply involved in the California bonsai community, Hideko Metaxas. Has been deeply involved for decades. And well, Hideko didn't accompany us. Another person accompanied us, but Hideko kind of arranged things for us. And after I got back, it might have been a year or two later, Hideko mentioned that there was an opportunity to study in Japan. And at that point, not many people had done it. And so a couple people were given to me as possibilities. And I chose a person with whom, Kathy Shaner, who will be known to many in your audience, and I had studied. And so his name was Yasuo Mitsuya. And he was at the Tokai-en, or Tokai Garden facility, which he owned, in Toyohashi, Japan. And so because I was working, I was managing this collection, I couldn't just go away for a year. So I corresponded with Mr. Mitsuya, and we hit upon a situation where I would travel there for 1 or 2 months a year at specific months that he designated as being the most important in terms of what bonsai activities were happening. When I went there, it was a whole different world. In Japan, the bonsai was quite an industry. There was a lot of competition. So the quality was, it was like going from kindergarten into college to postgraduate work to go from, where I was to go to Japan. And yeah, I thought it was very important to be there, to be in that environment as part of the experience, because you can't experience bonsai in the same way here that you can when you are, say, in Japan or China and Korea, where it is part of the history, part of the culture, and where trees are plentiful that have been in someone's hands for a couple of generations at least, and have had professional attention in many cases. So that was very important to me. And after my study with Mr. Mitsui, I went back a couple more times. I did some uh, azalea study with Mr. Nakayama over west of there. And then I studied, took a course in forma display with Mr. Susuma Sudo, at Chikufuen, and then I things at Weyerhaeuser began to change in terms of the corporate culture and refocusing on uh, being just a timber company and not having things that were cost centers but not profit centers. And so in the last 5 years of my time there, I was looking at how the company could make the bonsai collection become self-sustaining. And so there was kind of a journey there. So, but in the meantime, the early part, let's say between, say 2000, 2015 or something, there was a lot of learning, a lot of adding to the collection, a lot of improvements. So it was a very good time.
And during when did you become the curator again? What year?
1989.
1989. And then my dad came here in 92 and kind of built Asia Pacific Garden at where we are now in 95. How did you come across meeting him? I still don't know that story.
That meeting is lost in the mists of time, or at least in the mists of my memory. I honestly don't remember. I don't know when your dad became involved in the Flower and Garden Show in Seattle.
Okay.
During those early '90s years, the Pacific Bonsai or Pacific Rim Bonsai Collection at that time, we did participate in several shows with the Flower and Garden Show there,
Okay.
and with Tacoma Garden Show. Did I meet your dad at one of those places? I am not sure. Maybe.
Probably somewhere there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing the Northwest Flower Garden Show this was our 31st year to year. So we started in 1994. So you probably ran
That's
him there.
very possible that's where we met. But I know that of course we acquired a number of trees from your father, and some of them tropicals, of course, because coming from Guangdong province, some ficus and then of course Chinese elms. So in other words, we had a professional relationship very early on, where he was a valuable asset to me in terms of being able to acquire quality material.
Watch it.
So back in those days, he could import large material.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
So that was a golden time when you could do that.
Yeah, because that big in the Pacific Bonsai Museum in that greenhouse, that really big banyan tree, like my dad helped bring that in.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really cool piece.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. So, yeah, so we had for a long time, we've had a good relationship, a very nice working relationship. So,
And you went to a BCI convention with my dad in China in 2010.
yes,
Was that your first time in China?
that was my first time in China, and of course, your dad was so. We was just. I don't know what I would have done without him at this point in retrospect.
Me too. Like if I went back by myself, I would have lost.
one of the things is, of course, his language ability, that he can speak both Mandarin and
Cantonese.
Cantonese.
That man speaks like 6 languages. It's crazy.
Oh, okay. And not only that, but also his connections. It seemed like every city we went to after the convention, he had a relative there. It made the trip just fantastic, and I really enjoyed that. And I went kind of by accident. I was asked to go there by a gentleman named Tom Elias, who at the time was either still or recently retired from as director of the U.S. National Bonsai and Penjing Museum in Washington, D.C. And he was director of the U.S. National Arboretum that event. And he was supposed to give a talk at this convention and was unable to, and asked if I would give the talk. So that's how I ended up getting there, kind of by accident. And then luckily had your dad.
You just, by happenstance, go at the same time.
Everything worked out. Yeah, everything worked out. So it was a great experience. And then, of course, I went back on my own in 2013, and then again with your dad in 2019.
Yeah,
So
I have photos from when he was on stage with you doing that tree, turn it into a cascade.
Yeah.
That was,
We had fun.
yeah. Every time I go back to China, I just come back fatter. Yeah, I was there for 2 weeks in spring, and I came back 12 pounds heavier.
Oh, yeah, you can do that. A lot of good food.
Yeah. Do you still travel abroad to Japan or China or Korea, Taiwan?
Well, I've traveled recently. Let's see, was it last 24? I went to the Kokushu exhibit, which is the biggest national exhibit in Japan, and it's in Ueno Park in Tokyo. And so I've been there a couple times. I've been to that show since then. And I'm looking to go to the Taikon 10, which is a November show, professional show that's in Kyoto.
Do you have, because like now we travel back to our farm in Guangzhou pretty much every single year. Have you ever visited there? Do you have any?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, I've been there. That's amazing. The trees and pots, it looks like farmland.
Yeah.
They're like row crops, but they're actually trees, individual trees in individual containers. And I don't know, I think your dad told me there's maybe 1 million
Yeah,
trees
close to a million.
there, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge operation.
Do you have any future projects you're working on?
Well, future projects. I've got a couple small things now that I do that are very rough and very beginning stages. I'm still hoping to get out this fall before the snow comes to do a little bit of collecting up in the mountains. And if I can get out by the middle of October, can maybe make it happen.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, it's the creative process, maintaining a tree and watching it develop over time is one way of being rewarded in terms of how a child goes or something like that. But it's not the same kind of rush of creative process that comes from taking a piece of raw material or a collected tree and doing its first design. So that I will always kind of look for that kind of satisfaction.
Is it hard to obtain permits or finding locations to collect?
It's hard to find suitable locations that are, let's say, high enough to produce plant material that has a certain amount of stress or a certain amount, that it needs to experience some like high cold or dry conditions. So no, but you can get a permit from if you're going on either forest lands, BLM lands. You can you can get permits by just going to the ranger station.
Okay.
And so that's not very difficult. You want to do that for sure. You
Oh,
don't
yeah.
want to go out there without one, but it's not difficult to get one. So
And what about like bringing the tree from high elevation down to sea level? Like the shock adjustment, is there a high fail rate?
Um, not if you do it correctly. It's like, well, how well do you do it? You know,
Yeah.
so if you bring it down, and fall is a good time actually, and the reason is, because our winters down here are mild enough that they don't stop root growth. So things can be brought down, and going into the winter, they're not going to get heat stress, they're not going to get drought stress, and they're going to be in a situation where the roots can continue to grow and establish themselves. So that by spring, when the new foliage comes out and puts a load on the root system, the roots have had a chance to already get established.
Gotcha.
And so early spring is okay, but fall is good.
And right now you're heavily involved in the Puget Sound Bonsai Association. Can you tell me a little bit about that group?
Well, I'm just completing my term now as vice president and program chair. So I've been for the last 2 years bringing in our guest artists, and so that's a very fun job to have. Finding material for them, and right now we're working on our first ever live winter exhibit, which is going to be at the Bellevue Botanic Garden in January, and I can't give you the dates off the top of my head, but if anyone goes to the Puget Sound Bonsai Association website, they will be able to find that information.
PugetSoundBonsai.com. I'll put that link in the description as well as too. And so you say you're finishing your term. What's next for you after that?
Well, I'll still be on the board.
Okay.
And so I'll still be involved in the activities at the club and so forth. It's just that my term as VP is coming to an end. But I intend to be involved all the time. And so that's fun and rewarding. The club has lots of good activities. There's a show in June, first Saturday in June every year. In May, in May, the annual auction is the first Saturday in June every year. This show is usually Mother's Day weekend in May.
That's Bonsai Fest.
Bonsai Fest, and here you are there,
Yep.
and you are part of that.
Yeah.
And the club has a spring sale and fall sale, and so on, so people can kind of meet and greet and exchange things, and we bring in 5 guest artists a year from outside, and of course next year we're hoping to bring in someone from China.
Yeah. And you're working with my dad on that.
I'm working with your dad on that, and so we're going to keep our fingers crossed, because I think it will be a wonderful thing to let our audience experience and learn more about Penjing.
Being the expert that you are, we often get asked, like, Penjing, bonsai, what's the difference? Can you give us a rundown?
Penjing, I think, is a little more descriptive because it suggests a potted scenery versus bonsai is a potted planting. But essentially it's the same art form, and bonsai, of course, originated from Penjing as the art was brought over, possibly through Korea to Japan from China. And but I would say that essentially it's bonsai now is becoming so international that it's in many cases very hard to tell the difference. However, in China, because it's such a vast country, and where parts of China have been, before modern transportation, relatively isolated from other parts, there are traditional forms of Penjing that are not at all like Japanese bonsai and are very, very interesting, including tray landscapes, rock and water Penjing, um, uh, land and water Penjing, where you're seeing an entire landscape in a tray.
It's like a picture, like a diorama.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're seeing certain characteristics that are different than Japanese bonsai in terms of having a mixture of a very, let's say, straight trunk and very a lot of movement in the branches that then result. Or you'll have this drop branch, typical of Lingnan style and bonsai. In over in Guangzhou, traditional styles, you see what they call ingenious cloud. Were very thin layers of foliage, platform style with very distinct pads of foliage on the tree, and a lot of things that are done in some cases very abstractly, making almost tree trunks into the shape of written characters, for instance, and other things. Drawing a grove of trees from the stump of a tree so that the stump becomes a landform. It goes on and on. In other words, I guess what I'm getting at is that the diversity of approaches in China, especially with traditional forms, is much greater than, let's say, the diversity of forms in Japan, which is very beautiful work, but there are some quite specific styles and ways of treating, quite specific ways of treating different species of trees and so forth.
Okay.
So they each have a certain characteristic that helps define them.
So, do we have time to take a look at a couple of your trees?
Yeah, I think we could just
Sure.
take a little look.
Let's do that. All right. So this is one of your trees. Can you provide some information about this?
This is a little grove of Chinese elms, and this was given to me back in, I think, maybe 1975 or 76. A member of the Greater New Orleans Bonsai Society, who was a landscaper, gardener, found some Chinese elm seedlings, little one-year-old seedlings, under a client's porch, scooped them up in one shovelful, and put them in a plastic tray, and gave them to me. So I've grown these since at least 1976, always in a container, and simply trimming keeps trees to their appropriate size. And so this has been with me probably the longest of any of my bonsai.
And when you scooped it in the plastic tray, did you reposition them or did it just grow like this?
I repositioned slightly. One tree came out of the middle at one point, and I allowed some root sprouts to grow to retain the same number of trees. And so there are 13 trees in here.
13?
Yes.
Isn't that an unlucky number?
Not in other countries.
Excellent. And this has clearly brought you lots of good luck. You've had it for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me about this one. You brought me over here.
This is a bald cypress. I collected this back in the 1980s. This is from Mississippi. I collected this near Pearl River, Mississippi, and it was cut off by beavers and resprouted, and therefore we have this very deciduous looking form of the tree that had developed since then. And of course, bald cypress, even though it's a conifer, is a deciduous tree, and this is the kind of shape where you don't see many bald cypress trained this way, but as a matter of fact, in the landscape, they will often take on this form. So,
And when did you collect this tree?
in the 1980s, Yeah, near Pearl River, Mississippi.
This tree's older than me, probably. And what about this one? This one looks unique.
This guy here is hinoki. Uh, hinoki. Some people call it hinoki cypress. It's a Chamaecyparis obtusum, and this one, because I was surprised after I purchased it that the top had been cut off, not once but twice. I found that I couldn't do a conventional styling with it. And I was reminded that when I had visited China, I had seen a style called square turns, in which sharp 90-degree bends are used in some of the branches. And kind of inspired by that, I turned the whole tree into a series of 90-degree bends.
Wow.
And I liked the way that movement could be continued throughout the entire tree. And because of that unusual branch structure, I kind of nicknamed it Walk Like an Egyptian, after a song by the Bangles.
I'm familiar with that song. I can't play that on the YouTube, otherwise I'd get a copyright strike. How old is this tree?
Well, this tree is not that old. I've had this tree in training for about 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
And was this collected out in the wild?
No, this was collected in a sales lot at Tsugawa Nursery down in Woodland.
We've been there before.
Yeah.
We're familiar with that place.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David, for your time. I know you're a very busy person, and this is our 100th video on YouTube, so we wanted to do something different. Anything you want to say to our fans on YouTube?
Well, I would like to say thank you all for watching. Appreciate that, and thank you all for supporting Nolan and his father and Asia Pacific Gardening, and happy bonsai.
Yeah, happy bonsai. We'll see you next week.